Hello, I'm Esther Gidhui-Ewart. Welcome to Africa 54. Here's what's coming up. Israel and Hamas negotiate toward a fourth exchange of militant-held hostages for Palestinians imprisoned by Israel as mediators seek to extend a ceasefire in Gaza. Sierra Leone's President Julius Maada Bio says most of the leaders of weekend attacks on the nation's main military barracks and prisons have been arrested. And drivers in Malawi get an opportunity to purchase electric vehicles through a local startup company while saving money on fuel. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. We begin our broadcast in the Middle East, where Israel and Hamas are negotiating toward their fourth exchange of militant-held hostages for Palestinians imprisoned by Israel. Monday is supposed to be the final day of a four-day ceasefire, but there are expectations that Israel might release more Palestinian prisoners and Hamas to free more hostages as both sides work to extend the truce. Hamas has indicated it would extend the deal, while Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reiterated on Sunday that Israel would welcome an extension that included Hamas releasing 10 more hostages per day. The initial agreement, which went into effect after 6 weeks of war, included Hamas releasing 50 total hostages, Israel freeing 150 Palestinian prisoners, and a pause in fighting. The United Nations says a total of 39 Israelis, 117 Palestinians, and 19 foreign nationals have been released. The United States, Egypt, and Qatar are among those advocating for an extension so much needed humanitarian assistance can be moved into Gaza.
Critically needed aid is going in and hostages are coming out. And this deal is structured so that it can be extended to keep building on these results. That's my goal. That's our goal, to keep this pause going beyond tomorrow so that we can continue to see more hostages come out and surge more humanitarian relief into those who are in need in Gaza.
The Jordanian foreign minister says he hopes that a meeting of Mediterranean country officials in Barcelona, Spain, will produce a unified position in calling for the humanitarian pause in Gaza to become a permanent ceasefire. The Mediterranean
the gap, and we believe we want to convince our partners that this war must end because it's producing nothing. What is this war achieving other than killing people, destroying their livelihoods, and again creating an environment of hate and dehumanization that will define generations and will take us a very, very long time to navigate through towards the future that we want.
The Mediterranean meeting brings together 42 delegations from Europe, the Middle East, and Northern Africa, which has largely been a forum for cooperation between the European Union and the Arab world in the past years. A 4-year-old Israeli-American girl was freed Sunday as part of the ceasefire between Israel and the militant group Hamas. U.S. President Joe Biden celebrated the child's release as he expressed hopes that the ceasefire can be extended. VOA's Veronica Balderas Iglesias has more.
Israeli-American toddler Abigail Edan was among 17 hostages that the militant group Hamas released Sunday.
Her mom was killed in front of her when her kibbutz was attacked by Hamas terrorists on October 7th. Abigail ran to her dad then, who then was gunned down as well, while using his body to shield little Abigail.
U.S. President Joe Biden shed light on the diplomatic efforts that have been at play to secure the Hamas-Israel temporary ceasefire.
We've been in close contact with the leaders of Qatar, Egypt, and Israel, speaking with each one of them repeatedly over the past few weeks to help secure this deal. The proof that this is working and worth pursuing further is in every smile and every grateful tear we see on the faces of those families who are finally getting back together again.
The road to recovery could be long, though.
Physically, many of them are doing okay. Emotionally And psychologically, this is going to take a long time to recover from. And Israel and other countries have mobilized substantial resources to be able to deal with that trauma as we go forward.
As part of the truce, dozens of Palestinian prisoners have also been freed. And fuel and humanitarian aid has been entering Gaza. But it's unclear if the ceasefire will hold or be extended.
When this ceasefire period ends, as Netanyahu has said, the conflict will continue. And that conflict will continue, as Israel has stated, until Hamas is removed.
There are hopes, however, that a permanent solution to the Israel-Hamas conflict can be eventually reached.
Until there is an independent Palestinian state, there is not going to be peace or security in that region.
From the Vatican, Pope Francis also underscored the importance of dialogue to resolve the conflict and celebrated the latest release of hostages. Veronica Valderas Iglesias, VOA News, Washington.
For more on the Israel-Hamas ceasefire and hostage prison exchange, I'm joined from Tel Aviv by reporter Ricky Rosen. Ricky, what more can you tell us about the situation between Israel and Hamas?
Well, we received good news about 15 minutes ago. The Qatari foreign minister announced that a 2-day extension of the ceasefire, including more hostage releases and more Palestinian prisoner releases and more humanitarian aid to enter Gaza, has been agreed upon. It was scheduled to end at 7 a.m. local time tomorrow morning. So it's good that it has been agreed upon and hopefully will go ahead as planned. The other piece of good news is that the hostage release that was planned for tonight and was being held up because Israel claimed that Hamas had violated its promise to release mothers together with children. And Hamas contended that Israel had reneged on their promise about which security prisoners to release. Seems to have been resolved, and the release on both sides will go through.
Ricky, when we last spoke on Friday, there was excitement about the hostages that were going to be released. We know that most of them now have been released, or some of them. Tell us about the reaction from families of those who've been reunited with their loved ones.
The families, of course, have been overjoyed, especially when they are getting small children released from captivity. But there's kind of a bittersweet feeling because many of these families also have family members who were killed on October 7th. And the group of hostage families as a whole feels very united in continuing to fight for more hostage releases because there are still about 180 hostages being held in Gaza.
Ricky, we understand there are several countries that are behind the negotiations to bring peace to this whole chaos. What's in the works really to end this war for good?
Well, we don't know exactly what's going on behind the scene. Qatar, Egypt, and there's a lot of pressure coming from President Biden in the U.S. to continue to extend the ceasefire. And then a lot of pressure coming from European countries and Arab countries to end the war completely. Israel will not agree to commit to ending the war because they say that until they achieve their goal of eliminating Hamas from Gaza and from the region in general, they won't stop fighting.
Ricky, many thanks. Ricky Rosen reporting live for us from Tel Aviv, Israel. As the Israeli-Hamas war continues, young people worldwide are experiencing the potential of their first major geopolitical conflict. Unlike conflicts before, social media gives people on both sides unlimited access to information that hardens their opinions. VOA's Anthony Labruto looks into how social media is impacting young people's perception of the war and their own place within it.
Never in history has the world been so connected to itself, Especially for young people, social media has provided unrestricted access to information, opinion, and world events. In the Israel-Hamas war, cell phones capture it all. Seeing the good, the bad, and the truly horrific, and not knowing what to do, can be extremely overwhelming when far removed from the situation.
Everybody is just bombarded by a lot of anti-Semitic or pro-Palestinian or pro-Israeli content online. It's like all I get on Instagram Reels, and that can take a mental toll. I would say also, like, it's a really scary situation to be in as a young student.
College campuses around Washington, D.C. have allowed students to find other like-minded people, either on the pro-Israel or pro-Palestine side, who want to take action and compel leaders to do something about the war. What that solution looks like, though, is different on all sides, and finding community has been essential. Especially within the nation's capital, communities of Israelis and Palestinians alike have converged multiple times on the National Mall to express outrage.
I have all of my father's direct relatives in Gaza today. They have been displaced from their homes. Some of their homes have been bombed. They are living without food, water, electricity, and fuel. The situation is very desperate and devastating. We are awaiting any moment to receive bad news that their homes have been struck. Our community here, Palestinian American community, as you can see in the thousands, people have come out to express their outrage.
In a recent report, popular social media application TikTok asserts that the recommendation softwares used in its video streaming are not inherently biased, but note that videos containing the hashtag Free Palestine outnumber those with the hashtag I Stand With Israel by 2.5 million as of November 13th. The social media application also points to long-standing intergenerational research from Pew Research that shows older generations, who are less likely to be present on the app, are more likely to support Israel than younger generations. But other young people see this division of identity online as an opportunity for connection. Maxwell Katz and his business partner, Fareed Abdibi, started Left Middle Right, a digital media organization founded on George Washington University's campus that aims to help college students and other younger people articulate their thoughts.
And I'm sure there are people radicalized on both sides, but the majority are just more involved and are more reflective of who they are and where their roots are. And if both sides just really sat in a room, let's say GW for Israel and Students for Justice in Palestine, and they talked for an hour, they'd realize that, like, they don't hate each other. They don't have an issue with their belief system. It's just a matter of their identities that clash at a geopolitical stage.
While a temporary ceasefire between Israel and Hamas is scheduled to end, social media companies and their users will continue to navigate their own identities in today's interconnected world. Anthony Labruto, VOA News, Washington.
Sierra Leone's President Julius Maada Bio says assailants who attacked military barracks in the capital city, Freetown, on Sunday have been arrested. Although the situation is now calm, tension remains high in the West African country. Almond Lee reports.
Gunfire was heard across Sierra Leone's capital on Sunday after assailants attacked a military barracks in the early hours of the morning. The government said security forces had repelled, quote, renegade soldiers who attempted to break into the military armory in Freetown. Gunmen also attacked a police station and a prison, and some prisoners escaped. Hours later, President Julius Maada Bio addressed the nation.
The attackers have been repelled by a combined team of gallant security forces, and calm has been restored. Most of the leaders have been arrested. Security operations and investigations are ongoing. We will ensure that those responsible are held accountable through due process.
The unrest prompted authorities to impose a nationwide curfew. Tension has been boiling in the West African country since Bio was re-elected in June, a result rejected by the main opposition candidate and questioned by international partners, including the United States and the European Union. In August last year, at least 21 civilians and 6 police officers were killed in anti-government protests. In his Sunday night address, Bio called on Sierra Leone's political and traditional leaders and civil society to work together to preserve peace.
That was Almond Lee of Reuters reporting. Now, as the world pays attention to other crises around the world, hundreds of civilians are being killed by militia in Sudan's West Darfur region. A report by Human Rights Watch released Sunday revealed that the Rapid Support Forces and their allied militias killed hundreds of civilians in West Darfur earlier this month. Humanitarian aid organizations in Sudan are working to save civilians from hunger, malnutrition, and diseases. For more on the humanitarian crisis in Sudan, I'm joined from Nairobi, Kenya by Lenny Kinsley, the World Food Programme spokesperson in Sudan. Lenny, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, Sudan's crisis continues as the war rages on with less attention. Tell us what you have witnessed so far, particularly in West Darfur.
So the humanitarian situation in Sudan is an absolute catastrophe. And there's no end in sight because the fighting continues both in Khartoum, the country's capital, and in the Darfur region. And it's extremely concerning for humanitarian organizations like the World Food Programme because these are populations that were already so vulnerable with high levels of food insecurity. And now they're being pushed from their homes, having to endure these horrific events now almost 9 months into the conflict. And urgent support is needed. And WFP is on the ground. We've managed to have breakthroughs in accessing West Darfur from the Chad border, where we've supported emergency people with emergency food assistance, around 360,000 people. But that is very small compared to the needs. So we urgently need more access to these very, very vulnerable populations that are bearing the brunt of this horrific conflict.
What concerns you most, Lenny, when it comes to women and girls?
What concerns us most at WFP is these rising levels of hunger and rising levels of malnutrition, especially among children that are under 5 or pregnant and breastfeeding women. And the conflict is exacerbating what was already a dire food security situation before the conflict started. And we're looking at around 20.3 million people who are hungry, who do not know where their next meal would come from. And of those, 6.3 million are in emergency levels of hunger, which means just one step away from famine. And these are people that are in the conflict hotspots where it's the most difficult for aid agencies like WFP to get through. And this is concerning because if we are not able to provide support, then the hunger crisis will only deepen in the coming months or in the coming year.
And what kind of challenges are you facing as humanitarian organizations in Sudan? You know, with the ongoing war, there's all kinds of fears. What are you faced with?
So the first biggest challenge that we have is access, especially as I mentioned, where fighting is ongoing in Khartoum, where there are airstrikes and shelling, where the fighting is pushing further south and reaching new areas. In these kind of active conflict zones, it makes it extremely unsafe for aid agencies and for humanitarians to be on the ground. And as I mentioned, this is where people need us the most. And so we are appealing to both parties to the conflict to have a humanitarian pause that is actually lasting so that we can push through to these areas where people are most affected, where they need us right now. And so that is our biggest challenge in terms of what it looks like on the ground. The conflict dynamics are extremely complex with different groups in different territories, and that makes access negotiations also very challenging. But as I mentioned, this is what we need the most right now, is this unfettered humanitarian access, but also for the international community to not forget about Sudan in the midst of different crises that are happening around the world, because the attention needs to be on Sudan just as much, because this conflict and this humanitarian catastrophe that we're seeing can have wide-reaching regional implications, especially when we see these high numbers of people fleeing over the border to Chad, South Sudan, Ethiopia, countries that are also already so vulnerable. Resources are stretched. And so for regional stability, it is critical that the international community keeps an eye on Sudan and does not forget the Sudanese people in their greatest hour of need.
Lenny, thank you very much for what you're doing and bringing this to light on what's going on in Sudan. Lenny Kinsley is spokesperson for the World Food Programme in Sudan. We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, some drivers in Malawi are no longer worrying about stopping for gas. We'll explain after this short break.
In times of change, when the world seems uncertain and what we hear doesn't reflect what we see, we seek the truth. When we are told only part of the story, we lose trust. In moments of crisis, our dreams, hopes, and wishes for a better tomorrow depends on a free press. At Voice of America, we bring you the stories that people take risks to see. We connect the world and unite it with truth. At Voice of America, we show you the whole picture.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Linoch Mudu, in Washington, every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
In other news, international health organizations are expressing concern about potentially fatal diseases in Somalia's southwestern district of Dolo, where floodwaters left families homeless and their livelihoods in a muddy deluge. Mohammed Dahir, the water and sanitation officer at Masiko, says the possibility for a malaria and diarrhea outbreak is high. Residents say at least 150 people, including women and children, were abducted late Friday, with one person killed in a coordinated attack by gunmen in 4 villages in Nigeria's northwest Zamfara state. Gunmen on dozens of motorcycles stormed the villages of Mtunji, Kwanar Dutsi, Sabon Garin, Bahuta, and Ungwa Kawo. And the Marrakech International Film Festival is underway, bringing American and international movie stars to the Arab world, as war in the Middle East has led to the cancellation of other film festivals. Film industry leaders in Marrakech, attending one of the Arab world's largest film festivals, are emphasizing the importance of elevating cinema and artistic expression. The festival ends on December 2nd. The Malawian government has signed a deal with Israel to send over 220 young Malawians to work on farms. Opponents of the agreement are criticizing its secrecy and potential risks to citizens given the ongoing conflict in Israel. However, the government defends the deal as part of its commitment to job creation and youth empowerment. Malawi is assuring the workers' safety and security, providing medical insurance and repatriation protections. This agreement comes amid an economic crisis in Malawi, with significant currency devaluation and cost-cutting measures implemented by President Chakwera. Drivers in Malawi are getting an opportunity to purchase electric vehicles through a local startup company. The handful of buyers say they no longer have to struggle daily to get fuel at gas stations. Lamek Messina reports from Blantyre.
The startup Sky Energy Africa introduced electric vehicles, or EVs, to the streets of Blantyre in September. Company founder and managing director Shizo Thompson says the EVs will help motorists in Malawi save money normally spent on maintenance and fuel.
EVs does not have internal combustion engine. It means no oil, no plugs, no filters to be regularly changed. So these maintenance costs add up to a certain amount. So by cutting those, you are saving.
The vehicles are showing up on the roads of Malawi's second biggest city, Blantyre. Thompson says the demand has outstripped expectations.
The first 30 days after the launch, we have received over 1,000 inquiries on the EV, and in the same space, we have managed to complete over 10 orders of the EV. This means a positive development and a fertile environment for the EVs business model.
Thompson says the demand is partly because the Malawi government removed the import duty on zero-emission vehicles, which resulted in lower prices for consumers. Some mechanics in Malawi have reservations about EVs. However,
we have welcomed those cars, but not 100% fully. There is a lot of challenges which we can face concerning these electric motor vehicles. For instance, like how are we going to service these cars? Because we need to be trained as well.
But Thompson says electric vehicles are easier to service for mechanics who can handle routine maintenance like changing brake pads, tires, and shock absorbers.
And when it comes to the battery pack, the energy storage system, the battery management systems, as well as the inverter and the motor, these are special, is a special segment of our field, so it will be done by us.
Thompson says plans are underway to train more technicians across the country in EV technology. Meanwhile, EV owners appreciate escaping long lines for fuel at the pump stations.
When you follow technology, the world is on here. I can easily plan when to go or where to go because I don't need to go at the filling station to fuel my car.
For now, Zalero and others are charging their cars at home as Malawi has no charging stations yet. But Thompson says he's working with pump station and shopping mall operators to install industrial chargers across the country. Lamek Messina, VOA News, Blantyre, Malawi.
That's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.